today, so I'm just stepping in to help us move through our agenda. So let's go ahead and call our boards to order, starting with SDIC. Tom Hansel present. Kenny?
Kenny Stephenson present.
Ken?
Ken Anderton present.
SDIC is in quorum. Val, you're going to wait, I believe.
Yes, we don't have a quorum yet. Val Humble present, and I see Karen Myers is present, but that's not a quorum.
Mary Helen's on her way. I need to resend her this and the link.
So James is not here yet. Who from Pen 1 would like to call Pen 1 to order?
Looks like it might be you, Claudio.
Yes, it is. All right. Calling, never done this before, calling Pen 1 to order. Claudio Campuzano present. Actually, I don't see who else is here, so why don't you go ahead and.
Emerald Bogue present.
Annalisa Curler present.
And Corky, I think you've got MCDD.
Sure, I'll call MCDD to order. Attendance, Nancy.
Nancy Hendrickson present.
Nikki Schultz.
Nikki Schultz present.
Ken Anderton.
Ken Anderton present.
And am I missing anyone? Okay, got it.
Val, if you can just interrupt when you have quorum.
Yes, I will.
So just a reminder, there will be an audio recording as noted on our screen. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, MCD staff, for compiling us once again. We have a pretty full agenda, so I will get things going. Just a reminder, if you are not speaking, just use your mute button on the lower left corner.
Nancy.
Emily, do we have any public comment, public testimony?
We do not, and yeah, as Hong mentioned, we need to call the JCA to order as well.
Okay, I was going to do them when we
get to that part.
Okay, we can wait.
JCA?
Sure, this is Nancy Hendrickson calling. I'm present, and I'm calling the JCA board to order. Karen?
I'm here. Thank you.
And Tanny?
Present.
And who am I missing?
Reed, and then last meeting at Pen 1 may have discussed who is representing them. And it's Claudia. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Claudia?
Yeah, I'm present.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. Or Nancy, thank you. And no public testimony, so I think we're going on to our next agenda item, and that is Hong.
All righty, we're just gonna jump right into it.
And sorry, Hong, I have a technical issue. I'm sorry. So another staff person is logged in as me to this meeting, and I'm not sure who it is because they don't have their camera on. And so I don't have host controls right now. And so I need whoever is logged in as me to make the other staff co-host so that they can share their screens. I'm sorry, that's just like a back end issue. Show yourself. You can go ahead, Hong, if you don't need the screen share.
Yeah,
yet.
it looks like
it's
me.
Kristen. No problem.
I suspected as much. Hello, everyone.
Okay.
So,
This is Val Humble. Could I interrupt to note that Mary Helen has joined us, so we now have quorum for Pen 2. Calling Pen 2 to order. Val Humble present. Karen? Karen Myers, would you?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's this mute business. Karen Myers is present.
Mary Helen Kincaid present, but I already got reported.
Pen 2 is in order.
Thanks, Val. Hong, back to you.
All righty, well, thank you for your time. And I know we do have a big agenda, so I'll just jump right into it. The first agenda item that will require your approval is a proposal to adopt Resolution R 2012-01. And it's with respect to the drainage districts, it's to authorize the JCA to act as the contracting party on a real estate planning assistant agreement with the Corps that the drainage districts had already approved back in June. And at that time, it was contemplated that the contracting parties were the individual drainage districts. And we did that out of thinking it was out of a mere efficiency. And as a result of that, it led to the Corps subsequent changes to the agreement to require then that the individual districts be held jointly and severally liable, a provision that, unless we fund it, is not constitutionally permissive. And what that means is, and it's an agreement, under this agreement, as you may recall, we would be getting some contribution from the Corps to help us verify certain real estate interests that support our existing real estate work, verifying our real estate and strengthening those assets, as well as supporting potentially in the future some feasibility study construction projects as necessary. But the immediate need was just to be able to get some survey work that are enumerated in the scope of work and contribution by the Corps. So the expectation is the Corps would be contributing up to $50,000 worth of work, and we would be contributing up to $50,000 of work. And together, we will have a collective set of results that will be representative of about $100,000 worth of work, which is pretty important in terms of surveying some of the real estate and confirming some of our real estate easements rights. With that, the Corps felt like they needed to, because we are held out as one party in the eyes of the Corps because it's one system, they wanted a joint and several liability provision that wasn't in your June approved version. And I felt that was too much of a change that we needed to come back to the board on. Since then, we were able to get that provision removed, but only if the JCA would be the contracting party. And with respect to passing on to the JCA as the contracting party, the drainage district need to assign that contracting authority to the JCA, because the JCA exists really for the benefit and the common benefit of the 4 districts. With respect to liability, they have removed that joint and several liability. And so in terms of the inter-district liability, it falls back on the default standard of the Oregon Tort Claims Act, which basically says each party would be responsible for their own liability relative to their fault, which is what the law allows for and what your insurance covers you for. You are liable for what you cause. You are not liable for somebody else's fault, which is what joint and several liability would have held you to. So this assignment here should be a simple one in terms of your assigning to the JCA contracting authority. And after this, the JCA would be accepting that authority and delegating to Peggotty to go ahead and sign this agreement. Time is of the essence in the sense that we've been at this agreement for several months, and the Corps is asking for us to finally execute on it because they've got money that's set aside for this. And if we don't move in the next week or so, or a month, we'll likely lose that Corps funding. And I think that, I don't know if you want me to address the scope of work issue, but I can address that as well. So when I had sent out, or we had sent out the packet for your consideration, Tom Hansel, with his keen eye reading, noted that there was a change in the scope of work. And I will show you, if I may have permission from somebody to share my screen.
You should have that, your co-host in the meeting.
Okay. So I'm going to show you changes that were made to the scope of work. Can you see that now?
Not yet. There it goes.
There it is. It's coming.
Changes to the scope of work from your approved June version to the current proposed version. And Tom pointed out that there was this inclusion with respect to the reference of the urban flood safety and water quality district and their watershed planning requirements under the project objectives. And I think the conservative read is that there is an implication potentially of with respect to the scope of work that the Corps is expecting the drainage district to take on some of the watershed planning work that is statutorily assigned to the urban district because it's under the heading of the project objectives. My understanding, and I will try my best to explain my understanding of the Corps' inclusion of that language, and Mark is on, can chime in if I don't fully cover it, but the purpose of this agreement with the Corps is pursuant to a planning assistance statute, federal statute. And so the Corps had to find some very strong basis to make the case for us to get this money based on planning functions. And so while we have some planning functions in our real estate work, the watershed planning of the urban district was something that really caught their attention. And so they put it under here. There was no intention from the Corps to have bound the drainage district to the watershed work. It's not permissive because our statute is such that states that it belongs to the urban district. And so, but understanding the need to get unanimity on this and to move forward so that we can quickly get the secure this funding, Mark has worked with the Corps to propose some language changes for your consideration as an amendment to this proposed resolution that is before you. And the amendment really is just to make some changes to the scope of work as presented here. And basically what we're doing is the Corps would like to keep the urban references to the urban district and the watershed planning authorities in the scope of work to bolster their connection to their federal planning statute. But to address the potential inference of the district taking on this risk, the Corps has allowed, is okay with us redefining that language as background information rather than as part of the project objectives. So what you see here is basically the first part of the scope of work with red lines showing proposed changes to that scope of work as part of the proposed amendment to the resolution that is before you. So if we move forward with adopting this resolution where the drainage district is assigning to the JCA authorities to sign this real estate agreement to get money from the Corps to help us with our real estate work, I would recommend that then we amend to include this change to the scope of work so that there's no potential interpretation. We're taking on more, the drainage district is taking on more than what is authorized to do. So with that, I'll leave this up and we'll open it to, well, I'll let Mark, if I've missed anything, go ahead and chime in. Otherwise, I'll open it up to questions of the board members.
I think I would just echo everything you said, and I just want to stress that the project objectives as kind of reconfigured truly are reflected in the actual work plan, which strictly has real estate items pursuant to the existing O&M footprint or boundary of our responsibilities. So it's very much constrained to real estate if you look in the work plan. And now that is reflected more accurately in this revised language.
I see Nancy Hendrickson raising her hand. Nancy?
Thanks. Yeah. So number one, so we don't have a copy of the red line, right? Because I had something sent to me, but it's not that.
No, you don't have a copy of the red line. I'm
okay.
happy to provide that.
Okay, and then Mark, it sounds like you have worked with the Corps. So the reason they wanted to include that language is that they thought it made us more competitive for funding, I think is what I heard. But that with the rewrite, we're still competitive. Is that correct?
Sorry, I was unmuting my video. It didn't actually make us more competitive. The funding was there. There was a pot of money that was available and wasn't being utilized, but they still had, when they reviewed the document that you approved in January, their reviewers came back and said, this is supposed to be a planning assistance to states, and we need to tie this to a planning effort of some kind. And so they needed to put that language in there to just bolster the various planning efforts that we cited in this preamble, and tied it to that type of effort.
Okay. Yeah, and so that spreadsheet of who's doing what for the real estate stuff is the same. We're just saying this will feed into an eventual planning process. And we don't have to have the plan first. Something like that, right?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
very much so.
And first things first, this work is pretty much laying our groundwork, our real estate holdings to be able to do all future work, and of course, principally the flood safety work first and foremost.
Thank you.
Two people raised their hands. Who are they? Let's see here. How do I know who they are?
It's Corky and Nancy have hands up still.
Okay, Corky.
You're muted.
Sorry, could have sworn I unmuted. Has this red line version been accepted by the Corps?
Yes, yes, is my understanding. Yes.
Yes, it has.
Thanks.
Any further questions for Hong or Mark? Are the districts ready to consider a motion? Can I start with Pen 2?
Do I have a motion to accept this resolution? What is it? 2020 201. So does either of my supervisors wish to make that motion?
I'll make a motion, but I don't have the wording. Can I just say we?
So if I may, so the motion would be to adopt resolution 2012-01 with the amendment to
Okay,
revise the scope of work.
2012. Okay, I move that Pen 2 adopt the resolution 2012-01 with the amendment as presented. Is that okay? Okay.
Thank you, Supervisor Kincaid. Do I have a second?
This is Karen. I'll second that.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Let's vote then. Mary Helen, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Karen, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
And Val Humble votes aye. The resolution is passed for Pen 2.
Thanks, Val. MCDD?
Do we have a motion from NCDD?
Sure, I can do that. I move to approve resolution number 2012-01 as with the amendments as presented.
And a second?
I'll second.
All right, let's vote in favor or against. Nancy?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Nikki?
Aye.
And I vote aye. MCDD approves motion 2012-01.
Thanks, Corky. Claudio, can you address Pen 1?
Sure. Do I hear a motion from Pen 1?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
None.
Hearing none, let's call a vote. Emerald,
Aye.
Annalise? And we don't have anybody else that's joined us, correct? All right, and this is Claudio. I vote aye.
SDIC, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve resolution 2012-01 as amended.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Ken?
I vote aye.
Tanny? Aye. Tom votes aye. Motion passes 3-0. Thank you all. Is the next step for the format to take a motion on this? Or is this a separate presentation, Hong?
It's the same presentation. I think the format, the drainage district can just go on pause just shortly. The JCA will resume. We'll take over and adopt the JCA equivalency to this. Before the JCA is resolution JCA 2012-01, accepting the assignment of the assignment as a contracting authority or party to this real estate agreement with the Corps. And the resolution also allows delegation to Peggotty or her designee to sign the agreement. If you note, the agreement has legal certification as well as law certification on lobbying or limitation on lobbying activity that we need as staff. We need to certify, and Peggotty will designate the appropriate personnel to certify that. With respect to the resolution JCA 2012-01, I would also ask that the JCA board accept and consider the amendment that was just discussed so that we can have it rolled into their version of the contract that they will be signing. With that, I'll open it up to any questions of the JCA members. Okay.
I'll just say that it makes sense to me. I appreciate the way you explained it. It sounds like the JCA has many contracts with the different drainage districts, and this falls along similar lines. So I think it makes sense. Thank you. Any other questions?
Amended as well.
Excuse me, Tanny, I only heard part of that.
The amendments will be the same.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so just so everybody is on the same page, at the top of this here, it references the amendment as an amendment to both resolution of the drainage districts and the resolution to the JCA.
Thanks, Hong. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, this is Karen. I'll move to approve the resolution number JCA 201201 to authorize the JCA to serve as a contracting party on a cost-sharing agreement with USACE for the development of a plan to verify real estate holdings as it has been amended.
I'll second that.
Great, thank you. Okay, roll call. Karen?
I vote aye.
Tanny?
Aye.
Claudio?
Aye.
And I also vote yes. So motion passes 4-0.
All right. Well, thank you, board members. Please keep an eye out on your email for requests for signatures.
Thank you, Hong. Nancy, do you want to adjourn the JCA board?
Yes, with our business concluded, the JCA board is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
I would just wanted to add, Hong, when we send it out for signature, make sure we also have a copy of that red line so they can verify. Thank you.
Moving on, Item E, local sponsor endorsement considerations. Evan?
Hi there. Mark, do you want to get the slides up and we'll get started? And I believe I saw her. Jamie, are you still on?
Yep, I'm here.
Great, wonderful. Well, I think everybody was introduced to Jamie a couple months ago. She's helping us with several projects, this one and the assets and liability work group that some of you are working on. And she's been a wonderful help as we think about what information to present and what questions to ask you all to help work through the endorsement consideration. So Jamie, you want to kick it off for us?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Evan. So this part of the presentation is really focused on following up from the questions that you've asked at your last meeting and meetings prior to that about the endorsement considerations to get to a potential letter. So if you want to go to the next slide. So there's the number of things that you've asked for. These are the requests for information. And what Mark and Evan and I have done is organize all the requests for information into a couple of buckets, if you will, over the next couple of meetings so that we can guide you through this information so that you have the information that you need when you're considering a letter of intent. So we can walk through these items, but you can see them all here. These are all things that you've asked for information about. I'm going to go to the next slide, Evan. And so we've organized these. Oh, actually go back. That was what I was looking for, was that progressive disclosure. Go back one slide. There we are. And so we've looked at all of this list of information that you've requested, and we've organized it into two chunks. And so you can kind of think of this meeting and the January meeting as sort of one continuous conversation. So for this meeting, we're going to be walking through the potential timelines and funding scenarios, the self-certification of financial capability, the estimated budget needs for the next 5 years, and a little bit more information on the potential HTRW risks. And then for the January meeting, we're going to focus on updated project cost estimates, potential cost allocation methodologies, and the opportunities to secure the match. And the reason why we've broken it up that way, in part, is because it's a lot of information to be able to walk through in one meeting. And so we've packaged it in a way that we thought was logical to walk you through it. So Evan, go ahead and go to the next one. So again, as you know, the intent is to work towards a letter from all of you in March to the Army Corps of Engineers. The letter would include the bullets that you see here. And so in order to help raise everybody's comfort level and ensure that you've got a solid understanding of what you're signing on to, the information that we're going to be sharing in today's meeting and January's meeting will help hopefully to provide that more solid foundation for all of you as you move towards a draft letter. So Evan, I think at this point, I'm handing it off to you for the next slide. Is that right?
Yep.
Slide 4.
So really quickly to just start, and Hong, I welcome any addition as we talk about this. Last month, Hong talked to you all a little bit about this non-federal sponsor self-certification of financial capability. That is part of the requirement for the package that goes to DC in April with the Corps' report for further evaluation. And what we've provided for you in both the memo in your board packet that went out and here on the screen is specifically the language that is included on that form. It is very short, and it essentially, says that we are aware of the financial obligations for the non-federal sponsor and that we will have the financial capability to satisfy those obligations, and that this isn't a contract. The government's acceptance, so the federal government's acceptance and our acceptance of this certification is not an obligation to implement the project. They're just looking for some confirmation from us that we believe we're capable, well, that we're willing and we believe we're capable to move forward. Hong, we've discussed this extensively and sort of have landed with Hong on a determination that it would be best to get this form amended to identify that the drainage districts, as the non-federal sponsors, have the financial capability to do these projects based on the statutory capabilities of the new district. So we are currently working with the Corps to try to find the best way forward on this, whether it is actually amending the boilerplate language or addressing it in some other way. Our preference right now would be to amend the boilerplate. This is a national form that is used across the country in all of these projects. So naturally, the team at the Corps is a little resistant to amending the boilerplate, but Hong is very persuasive, and I've seen her amend boilerplate language that I did not think we would be able to get amended. So that is currently the plan. My understanding is that it's been discussed with Mike Wells as well, and he thought that was a reasonable approach, since we on our own might be able to get the financial, we might have the financial capability for PED, but once we get into construction where we're looking at costs in the 45 million, that's a totally different ballgame.
And let me interject here quickly, is that also is not going to be that it does fall within the startup of the new district when construction dollars would be needed. And just to add to this very topic will be discussed with the urban district in January to let them know what their eyes are wide open about us moving forward as a local sponsor. They're not part of the sign-on for it, but they are responsible for accepting the 4 districts' assets and liabilities. So we're just trying to provide that connection and make sure everybody understands what's going on from both sides.
Yeah, and we'll go through a timeline next. I actually believe that's the next slide. So yep, here we go. So this was in your board packet, but we're just going to walk through it a little bit to talk about each of these rows. And this is a tentative estimate based on a number of things that could happen over the next 5 years. But currently, what you see up here is that basically the next 6 years on outlined, and there is a big black line that goes through 2025. That is our estimate of when the new district would have a revenue structure up and running, and we would begin the process of transitioning to the permanent board and the merger of all the districts into the new district. As we walk through that, you'll see that aligns, at least currently, with the sort of best case scenario for the core process, which is based on a number of assumptions. The first assumption is that we are successfully able to get authorized the first time we go to Congress to ask for authorization for this project. So what you see in this first row is kind of the focus on the federal process, federal authorization, and appropriation. So getting permission to move forward and getting the money from the feds to move forward. Essentially what happens is, once we submit our letter of intent, the full package will go off to DC for further review. If it's approved, there will be a chief's report in October 2021, at which point that chief's report will get forwarded to the Assistant Secretary of the Army and the White House Office of Management and Budget for further review. They're going to have a number of chief's reports that they're looking at the time. So we will be, we're very competitive. Our BCR looks really, our benefits cost ratio for the report looks really good. we have a compelling case to make, but we will be competing against a number of other projects. So it is entirely likely that we might not get authorized the first time we go forward. It can take projects, you know, multiple rounds to get authorized. We're sort of building this timeline based on best case, you know, we get authorized in 2022. And the way that happens is through the Water Resources Development Act. We need to be included in there. And basically simultaneously, while we're working to get in the Water Resources Development Act, we'll also need to work to be a part of the Corps' work plan, where they'll designate funding for the next year. So assuming we get authorized and we're in the Water Resources Development Act, we get funding to start PET, the pre-engineering and design phase, then essentially each year we are looking to the Army Corps, well, to Congress and then the Army Corps to appropriate funding for this project. And so each year we will need to work with the Corps in DC to make sure that we continue to be included in their work plan. And that will sort of culminate with authorization for it to start construction, which we believe we'll be working towards around 2024. So as we're doing this, Mark, if you can go to the next, there we go. So as we're doing this, essentially, we're also working on some contracts together. To enter the design phase, we would need to execute a design agreement. That does not commit us to actually completing and constructing the project, but it is a commitment and it has a local match that we're going to walk through in detail after we go through this timeline. While we're working on the design of the first phase of work, we will also be drafting our project partner agreement, which is kind of the big construction agreement. That's where, you know, the commitment to construct the projects and the big local match happens. That's something that, as Peggy just talked about, we're going to have to work with the new district on that, because at least currently the thinking is that they will be taking over the, you know, kind of operations around 2025, middle of 2025. And so they would be the ones taking over the sponsorship and signing the PPA. All to be discussed further. And, you know, these timelines really depend on Congress and how Congress makes decisions, if they make their decisions on time, if they, you know, continue to do the WRDA packages every 2 years. There's a lot of different, you know, there's discussion about earmarks coming back, happens every 2 years. I'm not sure it's real, but that could change things. So there's a lot of moving pieces here, but this is kind of the general process. So when we're in the, if you can click next, Mark. In terms of local funding, we basically will need to put up funding during, if we're thinking just as the drainage districts, assuming the new district can, you know, absorb all of this in 2025, the drainage districts would be responsible for the pre-engineering and design costs. We just got an updated number as the Corps has been, you know, showing us their updated draft report of about 10.991 million for PED, which would put our 35% around 3.88 Mark, right? And Mark has helped us sort of look at how we spread that over a couple of fiscal years, which he's going to talk about in much more detail after we go through this timeline. So essentially, what you're seeing on the screen right here is the responsibility that we think the drainage districts would take on, assuming that this best case scenario works out. Again, this could be delayed. We also next month are going to talk about ways to raise this money, because, you know, we're thinking about lots of different ways to bring this funding in. So it's not just the drainage districts, but thinking through a number of different ways to raise this funding. So Real estate and construction, we're going to focus more on during during January's meeting, but this is just sort of high level so that you understand the process. Essentially, while we're in PED and we're designing sort of this first phase of projects, they chunk the work out in phases, or what they call increments. And essentially what happens is the design phase is going on. Towards the end of the design phase, the Army Corps identifies the really firm set of real estate needs. We know what those are, you know, in the draft report, but the footprint really gets firmed up and finalized in the design phase. And then we get a list of real estate needs that we would be responsible for acquiring, or the new district would be responsible for acquiring during construction. What we've been told over and over and over by various folks is you should not go and get any real estate until you've signed the PPA and or you've received the notice to proceed, which usually comes right as you're signing the PPA. That is really important because we get credit for the real estate that is acquired as a part of this process. And anything, you know, we don't want to do anything early that we wouldn't be able to get credit for. So we'll be talking more about how we manage that, that transition. And then essentially, once the first increment is designed, we've gone through sort of the supplemental NEPA and environmental compliance that needs to happen. And the project is the design is completed. We've signed a project partnership agreement. We've received our notice to proceed. We've acquired the real estate required for that first phase, only the first increment of projects. Then essentially construction can start. The contract is advertised, a contract is awarded, and we have the first phase of construction. Best case scenario, which it assumes we're authorized in 2022, is that we're looking at construction towards the middle and latter part of 2026. So still a ways away from that part of the equation. So Mark, if we can go on to the next slide. So I know what's really important in all of this is our kind of what our costs will be as the drainage district. So we want to kind of stop now and look at three chunks of costs that we've been thinking about as staff. There's kind of the work that has to happen before we go into pre-engineering and design, which best case, we'd still, you know, we have at least a year and a half to do that work, probably potentially longer. It depends on when we're authorized to move forward in which WRDA package. So there are some costs that Mark's going to walk through before pre-engineering and design. There are costs that we're responsible for during pre-engineering and design. That's the local match. And then a few other obligations that Mark is going to walk through. And then in January, we'll talk more about the costs during the construction phase, which for now we are, you know, talking about coming after 2025 and the transition is taking place to the new district. I'm going to stop there before I hand it off to Mark and see if there are questions. That was a lot. Corky.
I might be jumping the gun a little bit on this, but we've got local funding requirements we expect in 2023, 2024. That will be presumably before a GO bond measure could be passed. Does that match? Can we pay for those requirements, excuse me, under our existing loan? I know there are a lot of requirements about the existing loan we have about when we can receive that money, and yeah, do those two things, that our existing loan and those local funding, that local funding timeline, match up well?
So we're gonna focus in on that and that issue in particular of the local funding and the local match in January. I'm looking to see who is on the call. that might be able to answer that question. Colin, are you aware?
Yes. So, Corky, are you asking about the Infrastructure Finance Authority loan that we did for the certification work? Or I guess, yeah, or which loan?
Well, actually, either one. I want to make sure that we have funding right now, presumably lined up for 2023 and 2024. What I was referring to is our bank loan.
Yeah. We need to check on that. Many times when it's, there's always that fine line of planning versus design.
Exactly.
And we need to, I asked the same question, and we need to dig a little deeper on this very issue.
Okay.
So I don't have an answer, but it's a question that I'm concerned about or wondering about as well.
Thank you.
We'll work towards having an answer for you in January when we talk about the funding scenarios and how we could raise this money for you. Anything else before I hand it off to Mark to dig into costs? Okay, Mark, the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks everyone for bearing with us on this. This is dense material. So the first bucket that Evan spoke to is what we're doing prior to PED. And the main thing the main thing is basically working on our real estate organization. And you all recall last summer authorizing there was a total of 89,000 across the districts to continue to refine our picture of our existing O&M obligations, so the existing footprint. And that was also, we're going to be being matched by funds from that PAS agreement that you just approved, and leveraging that opportunity to double our money. But there is going to be extensive work. We're going to continue to refine where our gaps are on our entire real estate organization. And that is a big thing because we'll be doing the same thing with the new footprint once we get closer to the construction phase. And we certainly don't want to be dealing with our current real estate picture then. We want to get that behind us, be clear on and focus our effort on the new real estate, because that's going to be time intensive. Second thing is, towards that next phase is we're going to want to engage real estate specialists. So we'll have some ideas in the future of exactly what that means, but coming up with a strategy to acquire the number of parcels that will be in the real estate plan is pretty critical to do that expeditiously. And then third, real estate, I should say, utility relocations are extensive in the proposed plan due to the measures that have been proposed. And so we're going to have to investigate and produce some proposals for you all to determine the way forward on that, the best way forward on that, the most efficient way forward, because once design phase is over, we'll have to move quickly to implement those that we can prior to construction. Some of them are inherent in construction, can't be completed prior to construction, but the Corps does require those relocations that can occur prior to construction to be done at that time. I'm just going to take a quick pause, make sure that all makes sense. Okay. I just want to point out again, this is just, we're talking about actually like a year and a half lag here from March 2021 to the award of authorization in late 22. So bucket two. So now we're now we're at the PED phase, what's required of us. We showed this in the previous timeline. These are the costs, the 35% cost share of the local sponsors through the 3 anticipated years of PED. So the PED numbers are based on the construction costs and the sequencing. And so our total cost over the 3 years is $3.85 million. Important thing to consider in the big picture is that 3.85 million is credited towards our cash contribution when we get to construction. So,
Hey, Mark,
yes.
just a quick question. Is FY23 supposed to be 107K or 1.07 million?
Good catch, Nancy. I think we toggled between the converting those decimal millions to, so that is 1.07 million. Adjust that. I did want to stress too that when we do the design agreement, we will be able to build into the scope some level of in-kind services. So when the Corps hands us the design construction specs, we will be able to argue for some of our staff time to review the designs and make sure they're adequate. It will be constrained, so we wanted to put a conservative number value here. But these numbers could be offset a little bit by in-kind services. And I think, whoops, sorry. Again, whenever we're looking at this, I want to remind some folks who might be aware, the federal fiscal year starts on October 1st. Ours obviously starts July 1st. So sometimes there are offsets here, but the good news is that our budget cycle does approve our funds a couple of months ahead of the Corps' fiscal cycle. So we won't be struggling or rushing to make payments. We'll have plenty of time to have everything sorted out prior to the demand for each year. Any questions? Mark,
is your model going to do a cost sharing evaluation? Is this just the districts or the larger stakeholder group?
So
yeah, I'll let Evan address that.
yeah, we're going to talk about that next month when we look at various funding possibilities. I definitely think one of those scenarios that we need to talk about is, the discussion with the LRC partnership and the new district ultimately. But we also are going to look at, we have a set of grants that we're looking at and some other options that we'll outline. But currently this is just the cost that we're responsible for pre-engineering and design.
Okay. Further questions? Okay, so again, costs during PED. We talked about the local match. We talked earlier about the real estate preparations. So again, that we covered that before. It's essentially closing out our, hopefully we'll have closed out or beginning to close out our real estate gap analysis and tightening for our existing O&M prior to and moving into PED. And then we'll be talking about our strategy for real estate for the future based on our expectations for construction. Third item here is potential HTRW investigation. So the Corps has identified one site and we want to talk a little bit, I'll talk about in the next few slides about any residual risk and how we want to handle that. And then we want to talk deal with local permitting considerations. The Corps has certain requirements and statutes that they're required to construct to. And they obviously have the NEPA process that rolls in a lot of our concerns, but there we know that there are some local permitting gaps. And of course, we won't actually see where the gaps are fully until we receive the design plans. So there is time to bake things in there, but we have seen that we do know that there are going to be some gaps in the end, and how do we address those? And then finally, we'll have to continue to do advocacy and travel as we lobby for in support of funding. I think Evan mentioned there are other players out there, and some of them have already come to the table and have started to line up. They're finished with their studies. Others haven't, but we're in that mix, and it is important to make sure that amidst other studies that may be in areas that have been affected more recently by flooding, that we put our best foot forward.
Mark, I'm a bit rusty on acronyms. HTRW.
Thanks, Tom. I love acronyms. But this one's hazardous toxic radioactive waste investigation. So we briefed on that earlier, and I'll touch on that next. Good segue. So considering HTRW risk, here's their presentation where the Corps spoke to their approach to this issue. Their goal was to try to get us to the design phase with a pretty good idea of what will be required of us in the future to make sure that the best case is to avoid risk altogether, and to adjust our alignments so that we're not in areas that have potential contamination that we'll have to deal with during construction. They did what they're considering sort of the equivalent of a phase 1 investigation for all the project work areas and adjacent areas. Their efforts led them to narrow risk down to one particular site in the northeast corner of Pen 1. So in their plan, they have a very broad estimate, and I think that's going to be refined, but they have a very broad estimate of from $100,000 to $1 million that they will invest in phase 2 investigation at that site as it becomes more clear what needs to be done. That leaves us with the rest of the construction footprint. We know that the Corps did an extensive analysis of all the available environmental databases with respect to potential source environmental hazards to actual spill databases. And in the final plan, they will go through that again, and they will detail how they filtered things out. In many cases, we had up until midsummer four sites that were of concern. They found no further action letters from Oregon DEQ. So they went through a meticulous process to rule out this risk. That said, there is always the potential for undocumented legacy discharges and releases. So how do we address that residual risk? What we started to do was look at where the actual risk is, where are we doing excavation, both shallow and deep, versus fill, where we wouldn't have a potential of disturbing contaminated sediment. And so there'll be a few approaches that we'll be coming forward with. One would be to conduct additional phase 2 investigations of our own in areas where we think we still may have some risk, and we need to characterize that better. That said, a lot of the sites that the Corps investigated were filtered out for pretty good reason. I'm going to go over the excavation areas next. Second is if we know that we are concerned about residual risk, but we don't have an actual characterization or anything solid, we just know that maybe there was a lot of industrial activity in a particular area, and find it a little risky not to have a contingency fund set aside. That would be another approach, to set aside funds proportional to those areas of potential residual risk. And we also could use our existing environmental contracts to look at the work that the Corps did, try to lend their expertise and find some recommendations from them to help scale the prior two items. and just get a better sense of where the gaps may be from a professional standpoint. Is this all clear? I'm going to go through the excavation areas and the work areas next. This cartoon is very cartoony kind of impressions, but I want to just focus on the big picture here. The color coding is defined on the right. Essentially, I want to make very clear the red, yellow, green does not indicate where we have risk and where we don't. Those colors indicate where we're doing excavation or versus fill. So that's one half of the equation. First of all is the potential exposure, and that's indicated by these color codes. And then the other half would be where there are actually contaminants. So if you look at the bulk of the work in Pen 1 and Pen 2, you can see two red areas, or I should say, two large red areas. We have an area in the northwest corner of Pen 1, graphics packaging. That is based on some deep excavation for building a flood wall. As you move south there, we have some potential for shallow excavation to possibly grub those areas, sort of the setback levee, and remove any sort of hydric wetland, I should say, like sort of sedimentary soils on the east side of that embankment foundation. As we get into those further south red areas, though, because there are golf course pond features that really introduce some soils that we'll need to scoot out and replace for the setback levee foundation. So we have opportunities to encounter something if it's there. Now that said, primarily all the actual HDRW sites that were found in that area were in the northwest corner of Pen 1 and had no further action letters. So down along the golf course to date, we don't have any information that would lead us to believe that that whole area along the golf course has significant legacy, any kind of legacy contaminants or spills. But that said, we're along an old railroad alignment. So is there a possibility there was a spill that wasn't documented? Sure. So those are the sorts of issues that we're gonna be looking at more closely and trying to give you some visibility on. I'm gonna move up to Pen 1 and Pen 2 now. You can see the area along the north part of Pen 1. It's yellow because we're basically just grubbing that surface, and we're gonna be placing an armoring material along the base of the flood wall. So it's not very extensive excavation. As we move further right by the I-5 bridge, there the star indicates the one remaining HDRW site. So there's an area of risk there, which the Corps is investigating, as I mentioned earlier, on our behalf. And there's more extensive excavation because we're placing flood wall footers throughout that whole area. As we move east, it's green because it's all fill. There are two red dots because there are two 300-foot sections of flood wall. As we move to the Peninsula Drainage Canal, that's all yellow because there's a gravel toe, and in certain places along there, we may excavate a little bit in order to change the geometry of that levee and place the gravel toe. Again, there were very few actual sites of potential contamination indicated by environmental databases. The two circle dots are pump station work, and that would only apply if we have to do some excavation surrounding the influent and outfluent pipes there. I'm gonna move on to, I have one more slide to show the work area in the eastern districts. And then finally, primarily SDIC. The only other work in the eastern part of the districts is Pump Station 4, the trash rake work on Pump Station 4, and that's no disturbance such as this other work. The SDIC levee work originally was going to be some excavation and replacement of material, and in the refined plan, the Corps decided to place a blanket and do all the geometry work to address seepage on the landward side. So that's why that's green, except for the yellow, the very left stub, because around the pump station outfall work, it's likely that there would be some excavation. The cartoon also actually, there is also work down in by the Troutdale Outlet Mall, and that is also shallow fill. My cartoon gave up on me here today, but there's a small section of green there. With respect to the actual risk or potential contamination, obviously this area had a Superfund National Priorities List site. The Corps is in touch, has documentation of their contact with the EPA site managers. The site managers felt comfortable looking at the design footprints that any existing areas of continued contamination don't overlap with our construction footprint, but the Corps will continue to follow up with those site managers to address that. So that is kind of an overview of this intersection. Again, when you look at these slides, the green is just where we're doing fill. Red is where we're doing deep excavation and carry a little bit more potential to encounter materials. But when I look at overall big picture of areas not characterized by the Corps, I would say my biggest concern would be in the northwest corner, simply because we had a railroad embankment that's been operating for 100 years, and we're doing some deep excavation in that area. So that might be an area where we have more contingency, or we decide to do some additional phase 2. But I do think we do recommend getting expert professional assessment of the situation.
And if I can interrupt just a minute, I wanted to just add, I think part of the reason we wanted to share this with you is anytime you move dirt, there's always some unforeseen conditions. And those unforeseen conditions are risk. So that is the purpose of presenting this, is just to be aware, deeper we go, the more potential there might be risk. Everything may be fine, but we wanted to at least make it clear these are potential risks that we would have to incur. Thank you.
Thanks, Peggy. Yeah, I think the final note on that would be in my past, we've always said trust but verify. So we trust that the Corps has done a pretty comprehensive job of looking at this, but you need to verify, and we are ultimately the ones carrying the risk. They are not. So we want to be comfortable moving forward. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Evan.
All right. Thank you, Mark. So we have got a little bit of time left on this agenda item. Definitely want to take questions, thoughts. Just really quickly, what we're going to cover in January, unless there's other stuff that comes up and that you'd like us to add, is at the individual board meetings, Hong will provide sort of a legal overview of discretionary immunity and talk about kind of the impacts of that on your consideration and this project. We're going to talk through each individual project in your district and kind of go through those. We'll have a construction schedule, kind of which is related to the order of costs that the Corps is projecting, and some potential cross allocation methodologies. So ways that we could think about splitting costs up across the 4 districts, because the Corps did not do it that way. They see this as one big system, and they gave us costs as one big system. And then at the format meeting, we'll, if there are any updated project cost estimates, I think we'll have those by the individual board meetings, but if not, we'll make sure that we've given you the most up-to-date cost estimates that the Corps has finalized. we'll talk through potential plans to secure the 35% match for PED. So that's kind of what I was referring to earlier around, you know, whether we get grants, we ask partners to help, we use parts of loans. We'll have a more in detail discussion of that. And then we're hoping by then that we'll be able to sort of give you our staff recommendation. We have been, poor Mark has been working furiously over the last several weeks to get us all through a review of the updated report, which we just received right after Thanksgiving. And so, you know, we're probably in the best place that we could be after just freshly reading through all of that stuff, hundreds and hundreds of pages of appendices, you know, of being in a position to kind of tell you what's in the report and what we think as a staff from, you know, various engineering and technical levels, community, kind of those aspects. And then our hope is to be able to share a draft letter, a letter of intent, which is what we've learned the Corps formally calls it, and a resolution in January. So then you have over a month to kind of review it and think about it. And if you're ready, we could have the vote in late February. If you're not ready, we could probably push that into March so that we could continue to have some discussions. The core package needs to be in DC by April 2nd. And so they're really asking us to get them our paperwork and our letter and the certification form that we talked about earlier by the end of February. But we know, you know, there's a little bit of wiggle room in there depending on what you all need. So with that, any other discussion, questions, thoughts?
Evan, Mark, Jamie, thank you very much. Very thorough presentation. Is there an opportunity to possibly share the presentation with the board members?
Absolutely.
Seeing no other questions, can we move on to item F, real estate capabilities assessment? Hong, you're up.
Yes, thank you. I am back. So now with Mark's and Evan's presentation, they gave you sort of the big picture and the timeline of where things are in terms of the endorsement, PED, the PED phase, and then the construction phase, and what to look for in the next few years. I'm going to ask you to go back into that timeline and go back to the letter of intent and the feasibility study. And in fact, go back a little further in the step of addressing the real estate capability certification checklist that the Corps has asked us to submit as part of their finalization of the feasibility study report. As Evan mentioned, we got the draft report and they're seeking our comments. Once they get our comments, they package everything together and included in that evaluation is their assessment of whether we have capability to address the potential real estate burden that is asked of the drainage districts or the non-federal sponsor to handle the construction projects that are being proposed or potentially proposed in the feasibility study. For example, that includes the railroad on the left side, levee height increase in Pen 2, some slough work in MCDD, and some pump station and levee work in SDIC. The real estate work, I think we touched on it a bit, includes the need to potentially acquire real estate access easements for the operation and maintenance, as well as the eventual the construction. The need to potentially relocate over 500 utilities. And so all of that work is going to be placed on the non-federal sponsor, us, whether it's the drainage districts or the urban district to accommodate that. And so, as you can imagine, that's a huge amount of work in terms of surveys, in-house management, project management, legal work to the extent that we need to negotiate the acquisition of construction access permits as well as easements, and potentially eminent domain and relocation if there is a need to go down that path. So the Corps laying all this out in the feasibility study, and again, we only have about 30% idea of what these projects are, want to know if we are capable of doing that, whether we are willing and capable of doing that. So in the memo that we have prepared for you, there's a checklist at the end. So I lay out sort of the background and a checklist. And they're asking questions like, do you have enough expertise? Do you plan on getting enough expertise to do this work? Do you have enough staff? Do you plan on having enough staff? Do you have the right legal authority to assert, to acquire real estate interest? Do you have legal authority to assert eminent domain should you need to? How do you plan to address all of this? And so depending on how we answer that, the Corps will put in its assessment for us whether we are capable, marginally capable or not capable at all. And how that scoring, with that, the result of that scoring by the Corps will impact, again, the ability for them to assess us as to whether we're able to take on these projects and continue on the path of being a viable candidate or viable competitor to federal funding for the eventual construction or design and construction funding by the Corps. So at this point, for me, it's not about, from a legal perspective, it's not about whether the drainage districts are being asked to commit any money. That's not an issue here. The issue here for me, from a legal perspective, is what are the facts? What facts can we attest to as a drainage district to these questions to certify these facts? And in this case, they will take the results of these real estate assessment with our letter of intent and our financial certification as a package to then represent to headquarters that we are capable holistically based on our financial representation, based on our real estate capabilities, that we're able to move forward. So my understanding from Mark and staff is that this checklist is going to go to the Corps based on information we've presented to them, and that the checklist will need to include a sign off from the district. And I assume that that will be Peggy who will be agreeing and signing off on this checklist. Obviously, before she does that, with respect to some of the questions and representations that are being asked on this checklist, we wanted to advise the board of these questions, how we've answered them, and we've answered them with the best knowledge that we have today, and with the understanding that this will be part of the larger package of representing our capability and be a viable candidate for federal funding for the projects. So with that, Mark, I don't know if there's anything I'm missing, and I can also open it up for questions, and I can certainly show you, and it was part of the memo, the checklist that has the specific factual inquiries and the Corps' proposed response to us. It hasn't been signed by Peggy, but the districts will be asked to sign off on this checklist. And so this presentation is to seek the board, educate the board and seek the board's thumbs up to go ahead and sign it based on the information we've provided to them. I know, heavy stuff, heavy stuff. Any questions?
I just have one. You're talking about a checklist, and
Okay.
I don't see it in my packet. So did you say we
Okay.
had it or not?
It should have been part of the memo from Mark on the real estate capability, but I can certainly pop it up here if I may.
And Nancy, each board, it actually was sent out on Friday morning as a separate, basically a reply. So it wasn't in the main package. The
Okay.
memo with the attachment is in there. So you would, all boards have that from me.
Okay, thanks. That helps.
So this is the memo. It's in Mark's name, and it has sort of our recommendation, our background for you, and our analysis. And do take time to review that. And so attached to that memo is this Exhibit A, or Exhibit C, Attachment A. That is what the Corps will be filling out, or in fact has filled out, based on information we've provided them. And so the first part is really legal authority, which, I was able to help answer that. And the questions here really concern whether the district, drainage districts, as non-federal sponsor, have authority to hold title and real estate interest, and whether we have any eminent domain authority. Questions like, do we have a quick take authority? That's the equivalent of whether we have the right to immediately possess property when we assert eminent domain, and we do. So we've provided that response. I guess they marked no, but I don't.
They marked that no because at the time
they didn't know.
This is their draft, but it will be revised.
Sure.
This whole checklist will be will filled out based on our answers to the questions, and then they'll hand us to this signed by their real estate division head at the district, just to give you a sense of who's signing off on this assessment. It's at the district level, and then our signature is basically an acknowledgement that this is how they rated us and looked at it for accuracy and sort of disclosure. Sorry. Continue.
Okay, so other questions include whether the known projects today are within or without or outside of the district jurisdiction. And we marked that all of them are within the district jurisdiction. Whether there are lands on which some of the projects are going to be occurring are owned by us. It looks like there are some. And again, these are general answers, and certainly Mark and his team have the specific details on that. Coming back to the financial capability, go ahead. Somebody has a question? No. Moving on, section 2 of the checklist includes the financial capability. And this ties back to the financial capability form or language that Evan touched on earlier, about the fact that we are representing, based on the facts we know today, whether we have financial capability to take on the local sponsors' responsibilities. And most of that, or I would say the majority of that, would be the real estate work that we're asked to fund, which I think is estimated to be around 41 million for the construction parts of it. So this comes back to that. Have we reviewed and concur with the estimates? Yeah, the estimate's not a big issue. It's just an estimation. Have we established element in the financial capability fulfillment requirement of the study? Excuse me. Has it been established that the responsible district element, that the non-federal sponsor is financially capable of fulfilling all requirements identified in the PPA? So this is where, for me, part of the certification question that I didn't want us to sign off on without some sort of a qualifier tying our financial capability to the statutory potentials of the new urban district. That's the whole point. It would be very difficult for some of the districts to take on the real estate work estimated to be 41 million without the relying on the financial tools that are under the new urban district. So with respect to a factual representation we're asked to make today, we need to in my opinion, qualify it on the statutory potential of the urban district. Otherwise, without that, the potential financial tools of the urban district, it would be hard for the drainage districts to finance $41 million of real estate work based on our current property tax assessment system. So the financial capability question must be qualified by that. And what we've given them that position, we've given the Corps that position. And with that, my understanding is that's why they mark yes here. Again, this is a proposed set of response from the Corps as of November 30th. Beyond the legal and financial capability, this section then asks whether we're willing to participate and go forward with it. And this will be as part of the letter, will be confirmed by the letter of intent we're asked to submit. Here, they're getting some preliminary assessment and assessment from us with respect to whether we're willing to be able to move forward. Corky, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Sure. On just going back to that previous one where you said we qualified that, but that's not in this document. So I guess I'm wondering how strong is that qualification? And does that have the potential for creating problems for us at the federal level?
Well, so this financial capability response is based on oral communication and email communication our staff has had with the Corps. And in underlining this checklist is a questionnaire form that we're not presenting to you here. But in that, I've added that qualifier as well. In terms of whether this will impair our risk with respect to our worthiness of moving forward and of getting federal funding, I want to say no, just because without it, we can't make the certification. I wouldn't advise you to make the certification without it. So it's something that the Corps, I think, is aware of. I understand that the Corps headquarters folks are also aware of this. So my feeling is it may, but I think that but I don't know that it's going to be the end of this project. But I will let Mark and Colin and maybe even Evan provide any additional insight to that.
Well, I'd like to make one comment here before anyone else starts, and that is when we met with the Corps to go through the ADM process, one of the things that was extremely important to them was actually the matching up or the tie-in to the new district. And that held significance to them because it indicated that this was not just, 4 districts. This was the new district is supported, at least politically, statewide. So I just wanted to add that. I think it does have relevance. I've talked to Kevin Bryce. It does have relevance to them, is that the connection to the new district.
Okay, I want to make sure that it doesn't create hiccups down the road. I guess what I'm seeing, if I read this correctly, is that in relatively short order, we're going to have to commit to a financial obligation. Not right away, but it's coming up. And so I don't want to hedge too much now if that creates problems with us at the federal level, knowing that we can't keep hedging on this for too much longer. And the background behind that, I think, is there's a real difference here between liking the financial burden, the financial obligation, and being able to assume the financial obligation. Those are really big, different questions. And so I don't want us to get mixed up with it. We may not like it, but when the alternative is much greater financial obligation, the alternative of not being recertified, I think we would we would somehow be able to come up with the money. So that's kind of the background to that is before you say, oh, we can't pay that, think about the alternative. And then that might change your answer to whether you can pay it, because that's the difference between liking it and being able to. So I'm not sure. I appreciate Hong's concern here that we need to have this qualifier. I guess I'm questioning that a little bit because how long can we keep having that qualifier?
Well, to me, it's a legal representation question. It's not. I don't view. While I appreciate and understand the policy and the political and the business need to send a certain message to the core, this is a legal representation based on the facts that we know today. And the question is, with the proposed $41 million worth of work, the question is, does the drainage district have capability to take that on? And so from there, Corky, it's where are our sources of funding? And where are our sources of funding to do that based on what we know today, if it's restricted to us? And I think the fortunate thing we have, and I think as the core recognized, we have a new statutory district that's going to take that on for us. And so that's the even plane that we all can get on, and I think provides for the core more security in moving forward with the work here than potentially just having the need to rely on the drainage district themselves. Because if that's the case, with $41 million, I'm not sure that Penn 1 with Penn 1's financial numbers right now can bear that.
Nancy, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I think the legislation in the new district is also a fact we have in front of us right now that, it's not up and running yet, but all indications are that we're going full steam ahead. So I think we can take that into account. I think that what I heard you say is the qualifier is in notes somewhere, which is great, like notes of your conversation with the core. I definitely think we want to signal to this highly competitive process that, we're full steam and ready to go. Yeah, because at any point, it's not like the core is going to sue us. Hey, you said you would have enough money, but you don't. They're just going to say, okay, bye. We'll go to the next person in this 500 person line. So
they just pick up their bucket and move it to somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like our risk is very, very small.
Yeah. Well, and I do believe, I think we always have to remember, and I know everybody has heard this multiple times, and I'm probably speaking the obvious, but whatever we do as over the next 3 to 4 years as the individual districts and the format move forward, recognize that new urban districts, they take on the assets, liabilities, and they absorb all that. It's not like we have to divvy it out. It's not like you're not having to do this and having to do that. That kind of, you each come to the door with a basket and you put it on the new urban districts board on their chair. So, I mean, I'm not trying to make light of it, but it's the reality of the situation we're in, and in many ways stronger than some organizations that go in for federal dollars and they have to dig it out of their piggy bank. We've got mechanisms moving forward with the new district that's going to provide there is capacity there.
So I just want to recognize our agenda and our time. Hong, do you have what you need? This was just a discussion item, but I'd like to move on if we're ready to move to legislative agenda.
Sure. Well, so there is that checklist, and I think what comes out of here, because part of our response back to the core on the draft feasibility study report is submission of of the questionnaire and this checklist that will require, again, the capabilities continue on, but will require a signature by a non-federal representative. So Peggy, I think, is the executive director and will likely be the one that has authority to sign. And we just want to make sure that she can sign.
So Ken, you have a question?
Yeah, just real quickly, from what I understand, I agree that our risks are low here. That feds really just want to know that you're in it for the long term, so you're not wasting their time. The really commitment comes is when you sign the grant obligations or the other obligations that come with it. That's where your legal responsibilities come in. So I think I appreciate the concern, but I think we're all working toward the same path here and we're all on board with achieving it, however it can be financed.
So there's no formal motion, I guess. Are you just looking for a thumbs up or?
Yeah. Let me see here what the memo talks about. Yeah, I think a thumbs up. Or if, okay.
I see nothing but thumbs there.
All right.
And I want to clarify, there was one answer that was not in the positive that has already been changed, I believe.
Yes.
And
Yes,
everything else is the answer that the Corps is wanting. Is that correct? That sheds a positive light on this project. Okay, great. Thank you.
Hong, thank you for your work on this. Evan, I have you back up, legislative agenda.
Yeah, Mark, did you want to, I think I saw you start to speak. Did you want to say anything to close that out?
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to say, yeah, and the ultimate thing is that the assessment they found us fully capable, which is the most important thing when comparing us against all the other sponsors. There may be some items with qualifiers, but we were deemed fully capable, and we'll submit our checklist. We'll see which one of our exceptions or notes that they add to this, but we should look pretty competitive based on what we've seen. It will look slightly different than what you've seen, but we appreciate the thumbs up so that we can move forward. And I appreciate Ken's comments to that extent, realizing that the risk is further down the line. This is just making sure that they don't have a deadbeat sponsor that doesn't have the legal capabilities and doesn't realize what's ahead of them in terms of the extent of real estate staffing and commitments. And I think we all realize that. So thank you very much. Out.
All right, I will be very, very quick because you all have seen this before. We are planning on going to the legislature and asking for two things. One is in bill form or legislative concept form, which was presented in your meeting packet. It is a request that the legislature put at least 10 million into the Levee grant fund that they created for us in 2019 at our request. That grant fund lives under Business Oregon in the Special Public Works Fund, kind of side by side with the loan fund that we helped get created about 4 or 5 years ago. So we are just looking for a general thumbs up that we can proceed with filing that bill, which will need to be filed in about a week. Make sure everybody is clear that that's what we're working on. The other thing that we'll be working on but doesn't have a formal legislative concept or bill number yet is a request for $2 million for the new district. This is operating capital to keep them going over the next two fiscal years or biennia, which is how the legislature works. That one is, we're gonna work to kind of get that in under the radar so it doesn't have a bullet, kind of a bullseye on its back. Particularly, there's some question about who the Speaker of the House will be. We are hopeful that the current Speaker will continue to be the Speaker of the House, but there's a lot moving right now, so we want the flexibility of being able to go directly into the budget process, kind of work that request under the table, as we did with the $500,000 that we were able to get last session for the Columbia Core Drainage Districts, which ultimately is helping the new district as well. So we don't need anything formal. We just wanted a general thumbs up that we're okay to move forward before we file the legislative concept at the end of this month.
Evan, just a quick question. Are you networking with the local government legislative offices to bring them aware of this effort?
Yep. And we're working with, for instance, your government affairs folks to make sure that, you know, we've got our partners involved from the lobbying side, and we're working with the legislative staff to make sure folks are informed.
So I heard Evan ask for another indication of our support. Thumbs up.
Ken, do you have your hand up, or is that just an old? Thank you.
I think that's an old one. Let me see if I can take it down.
All right, I think I saw thumbs up from everybody. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Evan. Peggy, I think you're up with new business.
Yes, a couple different things I wanted to cover. One is we have checked on our assessments. We've all been a little concerned with COVID and how the collections are aligning with last year's. MCDD, we are a little bit behind, about 1%. Pen 1 is equal to what they collected last year. Pen 2 is a little bit behind, and so is, but SDIC is well ahead of where they were last year by a couple percentage points. So we will keep you posted, but I did want to let you all know that issue. In addition, I wanted to cover, we did go out with a CFO. We got about 30 some applications back. We have narrowed it down to 8 for phone interviews. I kind of consider them, it's like the dating game. It's a 20-minute interview, a little white of the eyes and how they handle themselves. And we'll be doing some more detailed interviews the first week of January. And I think the biggest challenge for us is finding someone that has had, we have a lot from the private sector, some from the public sector, and we're trying to find how somebody can step into a more public oriented position. So that's part of the reason for the interviews. And I am in the process of trying to recruit a existing CFO that is now retired to be part of that last interview panel. I'd like that input as we went through the process. Executive recruitment. We have selected Workplace Results LLC to facilitate the process. We got everyone's surveys back. As you know, we surveyed each of the district board members. We also surveyed the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District board members, as well as staff. So we're going to compile that, keep them in different buckets because different people look, each of you have different perspectives. So we will be going through that, and we'll be looking to set up that recruitment or the panel for that in this month, first and next. We're looking at 2 from the MCDD board to be a part of that, and 2 from the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District board in that effort. So you may find yourself tapped. The other thing I wanted to do, I promised you all to keep you in the loop on the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District. We have selected a financial advisor that's focused on helping them get funding, operating funds for the next 5 years or so. We have selected Piper Sandler. So we're working through them to finalize the contract and develop a strategy moving forward. They're going to be working with the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District Budget Shortfall Committee, which is headed up by Tanny through this process. So we are making headway on that. We also have gone out to those folks just recently to solicit participation in some of the committees that we need to get started. One is obviously the recruitment committee, which will be very small and short term. We're also recruiting for members of their board for the mission, vision, values, which will help them set the stage and the parameters moving forward on where their values are as it aligns with our legislation. And also getting together the Revenue Development Committee, which will be an ongoing one. And then we also have a Diversity and Equity Committee and a environmental committee that we'll be setting up after we finish the mission, vision, values. I want people to recognize we're not looking at those as unique pieces. They will be their results, the environmental and the equity committee. A lot of the work that they're going to be doing will circle back into that revenue committee. So there's not a disconnect. It's more moving alongside and integrating as we go down the road. And we will be focusing on making sure there's outreach through this whole process. We're going to provide the status of this feasibility study that we've all talked about today in their January meeting. And they're going to finalize their bylaws. Yay, that's pretty exciting. I know it doesn't sound exciting, but that makes it, solidifies their existence. And I don't know if she's still here, and I don't know if Emily introduced her at the last board meeting, but we now have an urban board coordinator. Emily, did you introduce her before?
I wasn't there. I don't, so I'm not sure.
Okay. It's Kirsten Hall, and she came from Vancouver and from the city of Vancouver, and worked with a lot of different committee groups that worked with their city council. So if I said that incorrectly, Kirsten, please step in and correct me.
No, it sounded right to me.
She's been a great asset. It's really, she's going to be a great asset working with Emily and coordinating that. And then the final thing I want to hit, which I did not want us to close without acknowledging Sunny Simpkins. This will be her last board meeting. And Sunny has been a deputy director for me under my watch. She's dedicated over 7 years to the MCDD, and many of you have a much longer history with her than I do. She's been an integral part of the transition for this district over the last 7 years, and she has really built up strong relations with the federal entities and with our federal lobbyists, the Corps, the National Association of Flood and Water Management Agencies, and she sits on the board of the Columbia Slough. She's been instrumental in incorporating in the environmental and our diversity and equity program into our overall effort. And I have to acknowledge she's had a very big and mixed plate. When I came on board, as she was a deputy director and had the portfolio of finance, HR, planning, procurement, and did I miss anything? Okay, I think I got it all. So I just, these are going to be tough shoes to fill with the CFO, but I plan on, we'll be tapping on some of her expertise moving forward through the transition. But I just want to say this organization will not be the same without her. And I just want to, she's truly left a footprint, a good footprint on our district. And I just wanted to acknowledge that.
I can't see how to raise my hand, so I'm just going to speak up quickly to Sunny Simpkins. She's also been a great asset to the community, to the neighborhoods, and she was instrumental in getting a path paved for ADA compliance in the Children's Arboretum. So I really want to acknowledge that because that was huge for the East Columbia neighborhood and for the park system.
I agree. I'm gonna miss Sunny.
Just want to open up discussion from any other board members on new business.
Yes, I have a question. This is Val Humble. I noticed in the emailings from the special districts, SDAO, that there was issues of possible federal money that districts could have applied for, possibly got. Did we apply for, did we qualify for, did we get any money? Is there any information about that program at all?
Is that for the COVID?
Yeah, COVID.
Yes,
Fed monies.
Yeah, Sunny managed to get us some buckos.
Good.
Yeah, and I'll answer a little bit. So the county, they handled the distribution of it, and they were not able to distribute funds to kind of some of the other agencies. We did get funding through FEMA for some reimbursements.
Thanks for taking care of that.
I have one other quick, I think it can go out and pack up, but I'd rather say it in person. I'm working on the Vanport Place Marking Project and Corky is on our board, but I wanted to thank the MCDD district and Penn 2 for their contribution to a sponsorship that'll help us do our signs. We hope to have one in the ground in April. I'll send everyone a picture of it, but we've really made progress on the project, and your support was extremely helpful in helping us move forward with that project. So thank you in person, and you'll get an official thank you when we have a picture of the sign that you helped put in the ground to recognize Vanport.
Mary Helen, just point of clarification, under participants at the lower bottom of your screen, you'll see raised hand opportunity. Val, I think you have the opportunity to adjourn at this time.
Just having concluded all the business for Penn 2 is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Take care. Happy holidays. Emily?
Yeah, Penn 1, we'll just go ahead and bump that agenda item to the next meeting when they'll have quorum. They'll meet again in January on their own, and so we can discuss that item then.
So I'll go ahead and adjourn Penn 1. Penn 1 is adjourned.
Have happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Take care, everybody.
Holidays. Mr. Owen, are you ready?
I am. Good afternoon, all. I had to look at my time. I believe I have a quick item for your consideration. In your board packet included for MCDD included a letter that MCDD received on November 20th of this year from a local homeowners association asking us to consider keeping the lake levels in Fairview Lake raised all year round. And as the packet suggested, we have been dropping the lake levels on or about October 15th in preparation for the wet weather season to provide more flood storage for not only the properties around Fairview Lake, but also just as important downstream, because there are some areas that flood out during the 100-year storm event. Those lake levels are raised now by May 1st. They were raised by Memorial Day weekend, but just in this last agreement that we just signed with one of the homeowner associations and City of Fairview, we increased or moved up the fill date from Memorial Day to May 1st, because after a rainfall analysis I did, it seemed like that was a safe adjustment we could make. So this homeowner association is asking to keep the lake levels up for the entire year. And this has been an ongoing topic for this area, and maybe Commissioner Schultz can comment more about that. But this was a formal letter presented to us, and as you saw in your packet, the recommendation I'd like to make is that we, with your direction, we consider examining this scenario in next fiscal year when we have a little more time and funding to study how a raised lake level would affect potential flood risk, not only around the lake, but downstream. So any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. I wasn't aware that this was happening. I live on Fairview Lake, but my first notice of this was in the board packet. So the Property Owners Association, just informationally, since then, the Interlochen Homeowners Association and the Fairview Lake Property Owners Association, I believe, have also signed on to this letter. I saw that in an email that just went around maybe a day or two ago. And in the letter from the Homeowners Association, they had a couple conjectures, or they said that MCDD would be able to quickly pump down the lake in a flood situation. They said that, I'm just wondering if the things that they're saying that could be done for flood risk, because I have been on the lake during floods, and it wouldn't impact my house, but there are houses that I suspect it would. I don't know the elevations, but, and then it would definitely, a flood could definitely impact people's boats, docks, landscaping, right? So are what they're saying about how MCDD could mitigate a flood, are those correct, reasonable, and do they include cost?
Certainly Pump Station 4 could pump down the water that's in the slough. The slough is only so wide, and so there's only a certain amount of volume that actually can get to Pump Station 4. The lake, of course, is much wider, has a lot bigger volume. So technically, we can pump it down. I don't know if we can pump it down quick enough. And so I need, part of my assessment that I would have to do is connect with our operations, as well as look back at our SCADA information to understand how quickly we can pump it down. Normally, we don't get a lot of time. I mean, we get maybe a couple of days, 4 or 5 days at best, to understand if there's a major storm coming through. For example, I just found out a day or two ago that we're going to have over 2 inches of rain over 48 hours this coming weekend and Sunday and Monday. That's starting to raise my attention, but it's not something it's something we can handle. So that's the timeline. So I don't know the answer to the question quite yet of how quickly we can pump it down.
Well, the reason I was asking that question is I think that there may be some appropriate outreach to many of the people that are involved in this have not lived on the lake. They've moved on since 1996. They haven't been here through a flood event. They're not aware of what could happen and what's reasonable for the drainage district to respond. So I just think that needs to be part of the whole discussion.
Well,
I would love to have the lake up year round, but I also don't want anyone's home to be flooded. Or if there's property damages, there'd be a liability question for the district as well.
Yeah, the question too is, do they know the risks they're taking on with their insurance is going to cover them in the event of a flood?
Yeah, and I was wondering, if you pump it down quickly, what does that mean in terms of erosion and sediment downstream? I know there's, from what I understand, I won't say I know, from what I understand, your pumping regimes take into account not wanting to cause erosion. And so I expect that would be throughout the whole system. And if you need to pump something down quickly, however long it's going to take, does that move this burden downstream? Does it cause sediment transport? Those kinds of things. So I assume, Bill, that those are the kinds of things you will be looking at because you mentioned downstream impacts in a study.
Most homeowners on the lake are familiar with the annual drawdown and how long that takes, but that happens in the dry season, right? Or at the beginning of the rainy season where there is capacity downstream for the water to flow to. So it would be different if we were looking at a flood. There might be general flooding in the system.
And different if we're looking at a surprise flood. As Bill mentioned, maybe we get 4 or 5 days notice, but there are going to be times where you get 1 day notice, and that's not all that far-fetched. I completely agree with Nancy's points, and I think in general, I think this is a great conversation to have, and I would embrace it. It sounds to me like you have a community coming to you with a reasonable request. They're willing to take on certain risks. I love that. It's something we want to engage them on and not just rebuff them, obviously, and not that you are. But at the same time, I'm under the impression, a prejudiced impression, that they are looking at just a narrow view of it. They're not considering these broader ramifications, such as the ones that Nancy just pointed out. So let's engage them in the conversation. Let's have that, but let's make sure that we're making a reasonable and objective decision that takes into account a variety of issues.
Good, I appreciate it.
Bill, how much did you anticipate cost of doing this work will be?
I haven't had a chance to examine this yet. I mean, it's gonna be over 10,000, but it's gonna be under 100,000. So.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you'd given me originally about a $20,000, but you don't know till you start the work. And so there is a decision there of, if this is a question, I'm throwing it out here. I'm not asking for a response, depending on what it would cost to help better understand this, is if it gets to a higher number, if that community is willing to help bear some of the cost as it relates to their properties to do this study.
I think that's a great question, and I would go to that community with that question earlier rather than later.
Yeah.
Come up with that estimate. Say this is what it's costing us. We're doing recertification. We're looking at massive increases in tax assessments. Understand that it's probably not fair for us to accommodate your request on the backs of everybody else. We can do some of that, but let's split it up in a reasonable way. I think I would go to them with that question and say, is this worth it to you? And they may say, oh, gee, no, I don't know, but let's have that conversation.
It shouldn't go back to this homeowners association. Well, it should go back to this homeowners association specifically, but it should also go to City of Fairview and the Fairview Lake Property Owners Association, because City of Fairview has parks that are lakeside. Right? And the Fairview Lake Property Owners Association represents all homeowners on the lake, not just the ones in this small portion of the lake.
Good to know. Thank you. Okay. So, is it appropriate for me what I'm hearing is that we should be doing some outreach over the next couple of months or so. And recognizing that we've received a letter and helping them educate a little bit of what we have been doing so far, asking about insurance questions, as well as whether they're willing to pay, potentially willing to cost share on a future project that would start after July 2021. Is that, and with that, I can propose a budget for that next year. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, and I think the only thing I heard that Corky said that I didn't quite hear in your response, Bill, is for us to get a better understanding of what that's going to cost. We can respond to when we respond to the property owners, to be able to give them, when we're doing that outreach, to give them at least a general idea of what that's going to cost, so that we're starting that conversation right off the bat.
Yep. And just for your own reference, we scheduled the drawdown and the refill of that lake over a 2-week period. So it takes some time to go down and up normally. Okay, thank you for the direction.
Thanks, Bill. Moving on, gravity outfalls. Elizabeth?
Yes, hi. Liz Edgar, District Engineering staff, and I'll be the project manager for the Gravity Outfalls project. So I think you all are pretty familiar with the project. I'll skip the recap on the project details due to time considerations, and I'll skip to the procurement part. So we put out a request for proposals for design engineering for the Gravity Outfalls inspection and rehabilitation. And we had 4 very qualified firms who submitted proposals. And of those firms, we selected Parametrics. They were the apparently most qualified firm. And so we have gone through preliminary scoping efforts and fee efforts. And so we have looked at all phases of pre-design, inspection, alternatives analysis, design, bidding, and construction. And we're anticipating it's going to be a 2-year effort if we're able to get this kicked off immediately. One of the biggest considerations with that timeline is being able to do construction during the in-water work period, which is June to early September. And so if we're going to hit that period, summer of 2022, we need to kick design efforts off right away. One aspect of what the design engineer will be doing for us is to provide us with an analysis on how we will most effectively be able to inspect this infrastructure. Because these outfalls are completely submerged, we can't just walk into them and look at them. But inspection is going to be very important for both the design aspect, and then it is a requirement of the Army Corps of Engineers as part of the RIP process. And so as soon as we've prepared an inspection plan, we'll seek proposals for that. And then after that, we will prepare an alternatives analysis moving to present to the boards again to ensure that we should keep moving forward with this process. And if the boards agree, we will move into design. Do you have any questions about the information that was presented in the write-up or about information I just offered?
I'll open it up to the boards to throw questions out to Liz. Go ahead, Tammy.
Thanks, Tom. Liz, I just had a couple questions for SDIC. We estimated in a budget 764,000. And this 215, how does that fit into that?
That is a good question. So the design engineering for SDIC, actually, the fee proposal has come in under what was estimated as part of the budgeting process. We anticipated the design engineering to be more to the tune of $250,000. So budget-wise, you should be okay on that. That being said, construction has inflated quite a bit. And so as part of the alternatives analysis, we'll be reanalyzing the construction budget, and I'll update you with what we find from that.
Okay, what percentage of the year can these pipes be used?
So the percentage of the year is different for MCDD and SDIC just due to the hydraulics of the system. One part of the engineering process that we're going to be doing is going to be a hydraulics analysis. For SDIC, we have a couple month period where these outfalls would be used effectively. For MCDD, the period is longer, more to the tune of May to September. Of course, it is dependent entirely upon both upstream and downstream conditions. And so that's not a hard and fast. It is dependent upon the weather patterns that we're seeing annually.
Okay, so hypothetically, there's a flood. And when would these be used in a flood situation?
If for some reason we have higher conditions upstream than we do in the Columbia, so if we have a big surge and the waters haven't drained to the Columbia yet, that would be an effective situation to use these.
Let me just add to Liz's response, Tanny. We ended up using these the first year I was here when the TRIP project was first started. So we were pumping at Sandy Pump Station for a while, and then recognized that we weren't gonna be able to keep up because we had a major storm event in late fall, Halloween, and then I think into late November, if you can remember. During that time, we let the pump station pump as much as we could, recognized that we're going to start increasing our flood risk, and then we opened up the gates. And so we were opening up those gates for a while until the Columbia River got high enough and we had to close them. So that's a normal operation.
So in a flood, though, the Columbia could be high enough that these are ineffective, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, but yet they're looked at as redundancy.
And they were for that one storm event I was just referencing.
Okay.
Not just redundancy, but we added capacity to drain Salmon Creek when, the pump station itself wasn't adequate.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are you going to look at the energy savings too? Because isn't one of the benefits you don't have to run the pump as much?
Absolutely, yeah. One of the largest benefits is the fact that it is a gravity system, which eliminates mechanical intervention of moving the water. And so it's a twofold benefit. First of all, we aren't paying for the pumping. And second of all, we are putting less wear and tear on that pumping equipment. And so it lasts longer and requires less maintenance in the meantime.
And that's important, particularly in the summertime months when there's always groundwater that comes into the water column in Salmon Creek. And we have to pump water from the Sandy Pump Station up and over the Levee, as well as the Pump Station 1. And so having these gravity outfalls available allows us just to, in some scenarios, we can turn off the pump station for many weeks or months.
So how often in an average year do you think you would be using the gravity ball?
In MCDD, we would potentially be using it in late spring, so May/June through. We were able to use them this year while we were replacing the trash rakes. So it was considered an emergency circumstance. We were able to use them almost through the end of October. And for SDIC, I have less experience with that, but I think that we would typically be looking at late June to mid-September. Bill, do I have a good feel on that?
The duration is probably right. I'd probably shift it to July, August into October.
Okay.
Well, that's interesting. I just had this incorrect idea that they were used very rarely, only in extreme high water events.
Yeah, and like I said, we will be providing a hydraulic analysis that will justify the use of this infrastructure.
Any additional questions for Liz before we consider a motion? Tanny, go ahead.
Sorry, just one more. And did we get the mini salmon run all worked out? Is that all settled?
We have had preliminary conversations with ODFW, and they have indicated to us that if we are able to install passage barriers, that we would be within the operational requirements of this. The upstream habitat in both SDIC and MCDD is not habitable for salmon.
Yeah, I just wouldn't want to spend $700,000 and then figure out that we can't do it.
And basically how ODF&W works is until we have a concrete plan, they can't give us an official yes or no on this. So that's one challenge, is that we've had informal consultation, but until they see actually what our plan is, they won't give us an exact response on mitigation requirements or what needs to occur there.
But you expect a firm response before we go into construction?
Yes, okay. Part of the design is permitting discussions.
Yeah, I'll just chime in and say that I appreciate the ability to use gravity flow, and if we can make it happen, I think it's a great idea.
MCD, you ready to consider a motion?
Yes, MCD. Would somebody like to move to authorize the engineering services?
I will. I move to authorize the executive director to sign the contract for engineering services up to $455,000 for MCDD.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? And votes. Nancy?
Aye.
Nikki?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
And this is Corky, I vote aye as well. MCA approves.
Corky, would you like to adjourn at the same time?
That sounds great. MCDD stands adjourned. Thank you very much, folks.
Good holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
And then there was SDIC. Do I hear a motion on the gravity outfall contract?
I can move to authorize the executive director to sign the contract for engineering services for up to $455,000 for MCD and $215,000 for SDIC. Of course, this is applicable to SDIC on this vote.
I'll second the Finding Nemo. Document.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Ken?
Aye.
Danny?
Aye.
And Tom Hansel, aye. Motion passes. Liz, thank you for your work on that. Bill, you as well.
much.
So now we are moving down into drainage systems maintenance budget. Bill, you're back up.
I'll just make some opening comments and turn it over to Kevin Stevenson, our engineering.
Can I insert myself real quick? Ken, Tanny, are you guys okay running a little long?
Yeah, fine.
Okay. Sorry, Bill.
Hopefully I'll make this quick. I'll just make some opening comments and hand it over to Kevin Stevenson. This proposal is to reallocate money you've approved for levee maintenance, and it's based upon an examination of levee risk that Kevin performed. So there's no budget increase per se, but it's just shifting money from one area to another. So I'll let Kevin provide the details.
Kevin, you're okay.
Yep. No, I'm off mute now. I do have some slides that you probably have seen. I don't have the ability to share them now in this presentation, but the intent of this request is to repurpose levee maintenance funds that were going to be used for tree removal in SDIC, particularly by the company lake access that the port has near the FedEx property. Those trees are on a significantly overbuilt portion of the levee and very high, like towards the elevation of the crest. They also aren't a RIP eligibility requirement from the Corps of Engineers, and we feel the levee maintenance budget could be better spent addressing some minor superficial slope stability issues and kind of reworking of the riverside portions of the levee system just a little bit further to the east. Some of these areas were called out specifically in the 2015 routine inspection that the Corps performed. They made notes. I was out there with them yesterday when they were performing the 2020 RIP inspection about the same area. So I think we can expect to see these comments again. And we would just like to take the money that would have been used for that tree removal and use it to support earthwork projects out in SDIC, particularly at station 10770. Is there any questions about what we're trying to do?
Danny, go ahead.
Kevin, this isn't something that was identified already by the Corps as part of the major plan, right?
It was not part of the feasibility study, no. It would have been probably beyond the scope. This is a fairly relatively minor maintenance action, and they weren't looking at, you know, minor superficial sloughs. They were looking at overall global stability and performance of the levee embankment. Similarly, the levee certification work that Cornport did, you know, this was a bit beyond that scope. So that is why you're hearing about it now, probably for the first time.
Thank you.
Is the resources performing this work in-house or contracted out? And I just wonder about switching out the resources. Are we prepared to do this work?
It would be in-house, and we are actively keeping a crew of MCDD's ops working on earthwork projects in general right now. So the timing of it is good. You know, they're going to be moving right now. They're wrapping up the SDIC tow drains and removing some of the tree roots. So that's been going well. And then they're going to move and start looking for tow drains, similar to the way that they looked for tow drains in SDIC a few years ago. And so we kind of have a crew already dedicated to doing this kind of earthwork, and it'll just be them going out there for probably a week to rework this area and then ultimately hydroseed it again in the spring when they can.
And I think part of it is, if I may add, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but the other is that, as Kevin was indicating, we're keeping crew out to do some earthwork. We're trying to keep some of our crew a little separated with the fear of COVID, of keeping people working in different locations so that they don't necessarily come in contact, because we have such a small crew that if one individual came down with COVID, we'd probably spread rapidly through the rest. So this provides a mechanism to also do that, to address that issue, get the work done and address that issue.
Sounds like a good plan. Thanks for updating us.
Yeah.
And Kevin, it's basically a budget neutral. Is that what we're looking at?
I think it'll be budget neutral, possibly even have some remaining budget. From the $40,000, I believe that was added to the levee maintenance budget specifically to address trees. But I'm not anticipating that this would cost $40,000 for the full repair. I went out yesterday. I have some photos and everything and looked at it yesterday when I was on site. I think we can get through it, probably closer to $20,000 between time and materials and everything. But that, some of that will be spent in spring when they come back to hydroseed too.
I'm in agreement as well with this work, but I would like staff to come back when time allows and continue the discussion around tree abatement. That's a bigger topic for another time, because SDIC, I think earlier we were very committed to investing in tree removal over a long period of time, just kind of knock it down. So your report kind of elevates. It's really not on the watch list, but so that if we can come back at a later time in that discussion. Tanny, are you okay moving forward?
Yes, I am.
Kevin, Bill, thank you so much.
Yep, thank you. And I'll connect back with Ken regarding the tree abatement work. It's not just a small little patch next to the FedEx property. It was over a longer, wider area that includes some port property as well. So I'll circle back with him before we come back to the SDIC board. Thanks.
Thank you both. Kevin, I'm sorry, the time's kind of compressed a little bit, I think, but you have the answer you need.
Thank you.
Amber, thanks for waiting.
Hello, hi everyone. Amber Ayers with Planning Department. Nice to see everybody before the holidays. We've brought the finalized drainage master plan to you today. I want to thank you for providing feedback at the last session. Following our joint working session with the City of Troutdale, we met as a board, and I heard your feedback and worked with our consultant to address that. So I'm hoping you received a final copy of the report. You have? Okay, I'm seeing some nodding. So it was a big file, so I was wondering how that was going to get transferred. Just as a recap, I wanted to mention that I heard some concerns around potential legal obligations for adopting this. And so we wordsmithed some things in the report, and also anything that stated ownership or future management responsibilities. I heard that as a concern. And so we did remove that language as well. Changed things from stakeholder lead to project location, so that because this is a joint drainage master plan with the City of Troutdale, next steps would be to figure out how to incorporate that into respective CIPs. So I wanted to kind of open it up and see if anybody had any questions pertaining to the final report.
Ken or Tammy?
Hi, Amber.
Hi, Tanny.
And I know you kind of got in this partway through. It's, how do I say this? I go through this and I look at 6.8. And it says these results suggest the trip weir storage was relatively little impact on the system. And the Blue Lake storage does provide measurable benefit by lowering the water surface elevation at the Sandy Pump Station.
Okay, you're at section 6.8. Okay.
Yeah. And what it kind of says is, when I read that, it kind of says that the weir is not very important. So I'm just wondering what your guys' take is on that.
I think through our last discussion, we, and through the modeling effort, I think that an additional analysis could be done to potentially utilize that area better than it maybe currently is. That is what was shown through this report, but I know what an important feature that is. And that was a sensitive thing to come to light, but I think that it's definitely not a not important feature. I think that in the future it could be utilized better though.
Okay. It's just, that type of language is just not gonna fly very well.
It was also, when we planned TRIP, it was a requirement of SDIC, MCDD core for us to provide that much of flood storage. So, it's surprising that there's that outcome. And also during the big event we had when we were trying to construct, it did show how much volume that area held. And the pumps were having a hard time keeping up. So it's kind of surprising language. To be honest, for whatever reason, the port system would not let me open that packet. So I didn't see it. I appreciate Tanny for flagging that, but if that indeed has a sentence like that, I'd be a little concerned.
Yeah, so I guess go ahead.
That was not something that was brought up or changed. So it's a remaining element from the first version you had. Am I hearing correctly that would we like that statement removed from the report?
I think it'd be better for my personal safety if it wasn't in there. Yeah.
I just think it makes it awkward because it's a requirement the agencies had. And then we worked around that requirement. We worked with the city and SDIC to create flood storage. And then if there's a document saying it wasn't needed,
I'll have to look at the exact language, but I'm certain that it's saying it's not needed. I believe it was just trying to summarize what the modeling was showing.
Well, and I guess the understanding at the time basically was to kind of bring into this was that if Amazon was going to come in, we had to build the weir. And that was how it was presented to the city of Troutdale.
and that's indirectly true because the core we couldn't get the city to authorize without proving and approval by the districts and the core that we had enough flood storage. So they wouldn't certify the lot. We had to fill lowlands, wetlands on the site and mitigate and provide, balance, cut and fill on the site.
So Ken, I assume you said you didn't have this in front of you?
No, I couldn't open it, unfortunately.
So I think the sentence that we're looking at is, quote, "These results suggest that the trip weir storage has relatively little impact on the system, and the Blue Lake storage does provide measurable benefit by lowering the surface elevation at the Sandy pump station." So I think we're negating, in that statement says you really didn't get much use out of the weir. And I think that's the angst here.
Yeah.
Especially where you had the other stream that overtopped and went into the trip area. at the time, and there was an artificial weir. There was a dam, an earthen structure that was keeping the water back. So, that it's surprising from a layperson's perspective from, what we were required to do, the trip development.
And just for a little bit of clarification here, that the sentence which Tom read is in a section that talked about the impact of the weir at the Sandy pump station. It doesn't reflect the value of the weir for areas upstream of that point, which would include the Amazon sites and the entire trip development area. So we're mixing apples and oranges a little bit, but regardless of that, I agree with you that that statement could be revised and to highlight the value of the weir and as well as noting its effects of water levels at the pump station, which is what the focus of the analysis was. Would that be adequate?
Yes.
Amber, are you okay going back to the consultant and having an edit made?
I'm gonna have, our contract is expired with them. We extended it to make those revisions based on our last conversation. And I will have to check and see what sort of liberties we can take with the document at this point.
We'll find a way to make that happen.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. We should be able to do it in some way or another, even if it's to pay them a 1 hour off to make one sentence change and then PDF it. I mean, it's.
Bill, thanks for drawing to our attention that it is kind of apples and oranges, but if somebody read that statement, that's all they see. So.
No, I understand that. We'll get it changed.
Amber, our apologies for not communicating this more clearly in the earlier discussions. I'll blame Mr. Stephenson.
It's an important document, so we want to make sure that it's encompassed and has the information you need to make some of these decisions. So.
And if this group has a challenging time making sure the interpretation is accurately portrayed within certain functions, anybody in the public that's going to pick it up is going to have an even more challenging time. So I think it needs to be, we'll take care of it.
So Tom, I wonder, and the rest of the board, I wonder if you'd be willing to go forward with the adoption with the an amendment to suggest that that particular sentence needs to be modified to reflect the value of the trip weir accordingly.
When is there an urgency to approve this?
I think from a capacity standpoint, but I've seen this through at this point. This is just my staff time to finish this up. I'll figure out how to work with our consultant on that aspect. I could bring this back if that's more agreeable.
Ann or Tanny, do you have a preference based on Bill's comment?
No, I'm fine. This is scheduled to hit Troutdale next week.
It is.
And once I down my my plate, I can probably Troutdale can probably sign off on this. I don't think that'll be a problem. And then the district can sign off on it later.
Yeah, I think Troutdale's sense of urgency is they'll be having some new council members after the first of the year and wanted to get this adopted while they have their current crew that is all educated on this.
Sure.
So Tanny, are you suggesting we vote on this when we meet next time or vote on it with
It's entirely up to you. And just Amber, just, for Brown and Caldwell, and I don't know how deep they were into this, but when this first got discussed, it was like $55,000. And I know a lot of things changed, but I think they probably did okay on the deal.
As far as total cost of the project?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Tanny, I can't speak to, that's not a cost that is anywhere that I've seen anywhere. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a drainage master plan for 50K.
It's 55. And that's just what was discussed in the beginning. Okay, that's all.
Okay.
In your comfort?
I'm fine voting for it now with the understanding that it's going to get revised, or waiting until January. There's no urgency on my part either way.
I just want to add too that Troutdale has been a good partner on this. They paid 50% of the consultant cost. We came just under, we have one final invoice from the consultant that's for $1,300 that reaches our not to exceed amount. And Troutdale has also supported some mailing efforts out to the community, 50-50. It's the staff time that SDIC took up fully.
They're paying their bills on time, being good players and all that.
They have been, yes.
Good to hear
it. Amber, Bill, how about this consideration? Knowing Troutdale hasn't heard our proposed amendment, I don't want to amend something without them having a chance to discuss it. So when you meet with Troutdale, can you present our proposal? If they're agreement, we just sign the revision. Because I don't want to get ahead of approving something that they haven't endorsed.
That makes sense. I can circle back with Troutdale today.
Thank you, Amber, for all your work on this, Bill. Much appreciated. This has been a long, arduous task. But coming to culmination, I'm very pleased having that behind us, or getting close to having behind us.
Yep, and I appreciate those comments. And while the budget is greater than what we were probably talking about early on, this does bring the district, the corporation up to a standard that I think should be as a public works agency. And so you need a long-term master plan, and now you have it.
Couldn't agree more.
Thanks.
And Bill, I take it you and your staff are very appreciative of having this document in your hands for future guidance.
Very, very appreciative. And not only does it affect, helps us have a stronger foundation to offer CIPs for you in the future, it also helps us understand how development activity is going to be happening as we move along. And so, but for both pieces, it's really invaluable. So I very much appreciate y'all's willingness to fund this.
And if I can just say one thing, Bill has said to me more than once that these drainage master plans have been invaluable in his his comment was, I end up using them a lot more than I thought. I mean, even more than he originally thought, or the purpose of them, that they are a real reference and tool for his work. So,
yeah, as an example of that, I've submitted an abstract at a national conference to explain how a plan like this can be used beyond CIPs. So other agencies across the nation can also recognize the value of doing this beyond just the traditional work of identifying a capital improvement.
Bill, I can just tell you from the city standpoint, as far as budget and planning, we're looking at these documents for 20 years. Continuously.
And particularly if we start talking about or the urban district starts talking about SDCs at all for this type of organization, this type of document is going to be helpful in that realm as well.
Again, thank you for your hard work, and I think we're ready to adjourn. Season greetings to everyone. Be safe, and we will connect next year.
Be safe, be healthy, enjoy.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.